ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। Welcome everybody. So today we are doing the second part of the Bauddha system, that is the philosophy which the followers of Gautama Buddha, Lord Buddha, follow. We have already discussed a little in the last class. We discussed a little of the life of Buddha. We saw that he taught orally, he did not write anything. So those oral teachings were recorded later, and we saw that Buddha disliked metaphysical discussions which had no practical purpose, so he dissuaded his followers from asking such questions and sometimes didn't even answer those questions. Then we saw that the primary sources of the Bauddha system are the three Pitakas or the three baskets, which are called the Vinaya Pitaka, Sutta Pitaka and Abhidhamma Pitaka. Then we discussed a little about the two major schools of Buddhism, that is Hinayana and Mahayana. Then we started the discussion on the main teachings of the Buddha, that is Chatvari Arya Satyani, the four truths. What are those truths? First is dukkha. First is life is full of suffering. Even apparent pleasures are sources of actually suffering to those who are far-sighted. The second truth is suffering depends upon some conditions. Suffering is not uncaused. If something is uncaused, then it cannot be got rid of. Something, if we want to get rid of, we have to get rid of its cause. So, fortunately, the suffering we endure also has a cause, and if we can get rid of that cause, Buddha says, we can also get rid of that suffering. So, while discussing the cause, we saw the chain of 12 links. How each chain leads to another link, then that leads to another link, and the end result is suffering. So if we cut off the first link of the chain, the whole chain falls to pieces and our suffering ends. So this is the second truth, that suffering depends upon some conditions. And the third truth, suffering must cease if its cause is stopped. That is dukkha nirodha. Now how to do that? That is the question. How to remove the cause of suffering? This leads us to the fourth truth. What is that? Dukkha nirodha marga. Dukkha nirodha marga. How to practically, what steps we should take so that this link, this chain of 12 links is broken and our suffering ceases for all time to come. So this dukkha nirodha marga lays down the path to reach the state free from suffering. It has 8 steps, that is why it is called the Eightfold Noble Path. One by one, Buddha leads us to the stage where there is no suffering at all, and now we will discuss each step one by one. Now, clues regarding this path, this old eightfold path, are derived from the knowledge of the chief conditions that cause misery. So, this eightfold path gives in a nutshell the essentials of the ethics taught by Lord Buddha. And this path is open to all, monks as well as householders. In fact, not only it is open, everybody has to follow this path. Otherwise, they cannot reach the state which is free from suffering. So, this is important that sometimes we feel that only monks are supposed to renounce, but neither Buddha nor Sri Ramakrishna has ever said that. Again and again, Sri Ramakrishna says, without renunciation, one cannot achieve anything. The only difference what Sri Ramakrishna makes is that the householders don't have to renounce externally, in the sense they don't have to leave their relatives, they don't have to leave their hearth and home. They will live in their home, but there also they will lead a life of renunciation. Sri Ramakrishna has never said that live in your home and just have a photo of any god or goddess in your drawing room and do what you like, enjoy what you like. So if anybody thinks that living in that way can lead us to a state free from suffering, he is sadly mistaken. So likewise, Buddha also says that this eightfold path has to be followed by one and all, whether he is a monk or a householder. The only difference is that householders don't have to leave their home to do this. They will follow it right where they are. That is the only difference. So let's see those 8 steps one by one. The first is right views. Right views means samyak drishti. Drishti means views, samyak means correct. So, correct view of what? Correct view of life. Life and what it is all about. See, last time we have seen that in the chain of 12 links, the first one is ignorance, according to Buddha. What is the nature of this ignorance? This ignorance is about the self and the world. We are ignorant about our own selves and also about the nature of the world. That is why, because of this ignorance, we don't behave in the way we should to get rid of suffering. So, since ignorance about ourself and about the nature of this world is the root cause of our suffering according to Buddha, the first step is removing that ignorance. Removing that ignorance means seeing things, viewing things as they are, considering ourselves and considering the world in the light of the teachings of these great saints. Then we will know what is the true nature of this world. Only when we know what the world is all about, why the world exists, what is our relation to the world, only when we have a correct notion of this can we proceed further in this journey. If right at the beginning we cling on to false views, which we often do, then naturally that impetus won't be there to proceed further. This is the thing. So, the first step to making ourselves spiritual, making ourselves moral, making ourselves religious is the acquisition of right views or the knowledge of truths. What is these truths? These truths are the Four Noble Truths as taught by Buddha. So it is the knowledge of these truths alone and not any theoretical speculation regarding the nature of our own selves and nature of the world is that which will lead us to the final goal, which is nirvana. This is very important. Now see, the first truth which Buddha says is the world is full of suffering. Now we should ask ourselves, do we really understand this? Have we really grasped this? Have we really imbibed this and made it a part of our lives? The first is, are we really convinced about this? No, we are not. If we really peep inside our mind, we are not convinced about this truth. If we are really convinced, then all attachment to this world will go away. It may not go in one day, but slowly this constant meditation and faith on this truth that this life is full of suffering will lead all our attachments to go away. Our life will change completely. But what do we see? Generally, we see all our activities since our birth, since we are children. All our activities are done with only one motive, and that is how to get pleasure from this world. It may be today, or we may have a long term plan that I invest this, I will get returns after 5 years, maybe 10 years, or my children will get the return, my grandchildren. We have big plans, huge plans. So, all our activities, if we really consider ourselves impartially, have only one motive: how to make ourselves happy in this world. And this whole thing is denied by not only Buddha but all saints and sages. All of them say that whatever you may do, you cannot have unmixed happiness in this world. If you search for happiness, you have to take misery along with that. Do we really have faith in this? We don't have. Whatever we may say, if we really have faith, our whole lives will change. We will go from pravritti to nivritti. We will be more and more unselfish as days goes by. And we will also try, those who are under us, those who are taught by us, we will also try to make them imbibe those truths if we are really convinced. How many of us, all of you have children, all of you are senior citizens, nearly all of you. How many of us have ever even told our children once that the world you are entering is full of suffering? Even one person? No. We don't. We consider that if our sons and daughters have great jobs, they become doctors and lawyers, our responsibility is finished. We have become good parents. But is it really so? Not according to Sri Ramakrishna, not according to Lord Buddha, not according to Swami Vivekananda. No. So this is the thing you see. This is very difficult to actually imbibe. We can hear innumerable lectures and we can even give lectures. But in our heart of hearts, to really imbibe this truth is extremely difficult. Why? The reason we have to go to the Jains, they have given a very good reason, that our karma stands in the way. You see, each one of us can hear the same thing, but the impression which that makes on our mind will depend on our karma. See, some person may read Lord Buddha's teachings. After reading, he will simply ignore it, saying that it is all trash. Another person may read it, he may think about it for 1 month or so, or 2 months or so, then he will say, okay, it may be good, but it's not for me. A third person, if he reads the same teaching, he will seriously reflect on it. He will seriously think about it with faith. While a fourth person, while reading it, will immediately renounce the world, knowing it to be full of suffering, and go in search of the truth as described by Buddha. Now all these 4 people are reading the same thing. So what is the difference? Why does one person imbibe it much better than the others? That is because of that person's karma. Previously, either in previous lives or in this lives, he has done so much good work, he has performed so much unselfish action that his mind is purified and ready to grasp those truths. If the field is not ready, we may sow the same seeds, but they won't sprout. If the land is barren, they won't sprout. So these teachings, they enter our mind, but if the mind is not ready, they won't create any impression. So this is the thing. That is why Buddha first asks us to understand and have faith in these 4 noble truths. Again and again hear about them, meditate on them, compare them with the experiences in our life, learn from them. It may take many years, it may take some lifetimes also. But if we start with the faith, like the Jains say, if we rationally and truly start with a faith that yes, these persons know what they are talking about. And secondly, we should have some sort of fearlessness. That yes, even if by hearing about these, even if by imbibing these, all my old notions of the world, even if they are destroyed, I don't care. I must know the truth. Generally what happens? We are so fond of this world, we are so deeply attached that if any ordinary person, if you tell him the world is full of suffering, he will immediately leave the place. He won't let you utter a second sentence. Because the ordinary person, the only source of solace, the only source of peace to him is worldly pleasures. His possessions, his honor, his fame, his prestige, every other thing. All these things. So even to think that these things are the causes of suffering is death to him. He will never listen to you. So first thing is, that is why Buddha says this is the most important step, the very first step, that right views. Right views means our ignorance about this world, that it is a pleasure garden, this is the aim and end of our life, it will remain forever, we will live for thousands of years. All these notions we have to give up. And again meditate on these truths till we are firmly convinced of them. Only when we are firmly convinced can we go to the next step. What is that? Right resolve. Right resolve means Samyak Sankalpa. Sankalpa means when we take a decision, we take a vow to do something. Yes, I will do such and such a thing on such and such a date. That is called a Sankalpa. So this sankalpa should be samyak. Samyak means right. It should not be a wrong sankalpa. Wrong sankalpa means, according to Buddha, if we say that I will enjoy the world, I will seek what I want from the world, there is nothing beyond the world, this is called a wrong sankalpa. So once the first step is achieved, once we are convinced that the world is full of suffering and we must find a way out of this suffering, then only can we have a right resolve. Right resolve means we will be determined to reform our lives in the light of those teachings. This is what is called right resolve. If someone is convinced there is suffering, immediately he will resolve to live in such a way so that he can get rid of suffering once and for all. So in second step, in right resolve, the aspirant is asked to renounce worldliness, all attachment to the world. He is asked to do three things. The right resolve, according to Buddha, consists of three things. First, renounce all attachment to the world. Second, give up ill feeling towards others. And third is desist from doing any harm to any creature. These three. These will follow if we are convinced of the Four Noble Truths. Automatically we will make a right resolve. What is that? What are those resolves? First, we will try our utmost to give up all attachment to the world, knowing that it will lead to suffering. Second, we will give up all ill feeling towards others. Why? Because that will create bad karma for which we will have to suffer one day. Third is desist from harming any creature, because we know that that will also lead to suffering today or tomorrow. So this is the second step, right resolve. It comes after firm belief in the Four Noble Truths. What is the third step? Third step is right speech. Right speech means samyak vak. Vak is speech, samyak is right. Right means good. So right determination, that is right resolve, which is the second step, it will lead to right speech. Right determination should be able to guide and control our speech to begin with. See, Buddha starts with the gross things. Finally, we have to control our mind, but the mind is very subtle and very difficult. So, self-control should start from those things which are easier to control, like our speech. So that's why the third step is right speech. Our speech should be controlled. We should abstain from lying, slander, unkind words, frivolous talk, wasting our time in all sorts of useless talk. So all these we have to stop if we want to succeed in the third step, which is right speech. Fourth step is right conduct. Right conduct means right determination or right resolve should end in right action or good conduct, and not merely stop with good speech. Good speech is the first step. Then we go into the fourth step, which is right conduct, that is desisting from destroying life, from stealing, and from improper gratification of the senses. These things are right conduct according to Buddha. When we don't destroy life in any form, we don't steal, Non-stealing is there in Yama and Niyama also, we have seen. In the divine qualities also we have seen. Asteya is non-stealing. And improper gratification of the senses. Improper gratification means those enjoyments which have been prohibited by our saints and sages. Like if we want to enjoy something which doesn't belong to us, that will be improper gratification of the senses. So this is the fourth step, which is right conduct. Right conduct will automatically lead to the fifth step, which is right livelihood or samyaka jiva. Now, renouncing bad speech and bad actions, one should earn his livelihood by honest means. This may be said to fall under right conduct. Actually, it is a part of right conduct only, but still it has been mentioned separately. So, the necessity of this rule lies in showing that even for the sake of maintaining one's life, one should not take to forbidden means. Even for the sake of our life, we should always stick to truth and the principles taught by Buddha and work in consistency with them with determination. So, this is right livelihood. After this comes right effort. Right effort, samyak vyayama. Vyayama, all those who know Hindi or Bengali, they know Vyayama is exercise. So here it means effort. Samyak means right. Our efforts should be in the right direction. That is, what does it mean? This means that there should be a constant endeavor to maintain moral progress. Keep on trying. That is what this means. Because when we try to live a reformed life, when through right views we try to change our way of life, we will encounter many obstacles. Because our old sanskaras, old ideas are very much inside. They are very deep rooted in the mind, and also not only the old ones are there, fresh ones also keep on arising till we reach perfect self-control. So if we don't have this constant effort, this constant endeavor to root out all evil thoughts, prevent evil thoughts from arising, and always nurturing good qualities, if we don't constantly endeavor for this, we cannot proceed on the path. See, we cannot stand still in this path, we cannot stand still. Either we have to progress or regress. If we give way to our old thoughts, if we give way to our natural tendencies, we will go back. But to go forward, we have to put up a constant fight against our old thoughts. This constant fight is what is called by Hindus as sadhana. So this, the sixth point, right effort, is nothing but constant efforts at sadhana. So this rule points out that even if we have progressed a lot, we cannot take it easy. We cannot think that we are safe forever. We cannot have a fall. No. Till we reach a very, very high state, we can always go back to our old self. So this constant effort to progress spiritually is called right effort or samyak vyayama. The next one is right mindfulness. Right mindfulness means samyak smriti. Now see, the necessity of constant vigilance is actually stressed further in this rule, right mindfulness, which lays down that an aspirant should constantly bear in mind the things he has already learnt. See, wise in our Yama and Niyama we have seen Swadhyaya. Swadhyaya means reading the scriptures, reading the teachings of our saints and sages. This should be done regularly. Why? Why is it said? Because these will refresh what we have learnt. These will refresh our knowledge and help us to constantly remember what we have learnt. You see, in the world, when we mix with so many persons, we are engaged in so many activities, it is so easy to forget. In fact, it is natural to forget. So, right mindfulness is akin to what we call Swadhyaya in the Gita and also in the yoga philosophy. It is like a cleaning. It is like a cleaning of our mind every day by remembering what we have already learnt by meditation on those four truths. So by doing this, the aspirant constantly remembers and contemplates on the body, on the mind and the mental states by reflecting on their real nature, by not identifying oneself with them. About the mind and body, aspirant should never think of them as I am this or this is mine. He should never think that I am this body or this body is mine. So this is done why? Why is this step mentioned? Because it is not easy to remember always what things really are. It is all the more difficult to practice this when false ideas about the body have become very deep rooted in our mind. So if we are not mindful, if we are not alert, there is a risk that we will forget these teachings. And if we forget them, we will again become attached to our body and senses and again become subject to bondage and misery. So, constant contemplation that this body is a frail thing, it is a perishable thing, it can never give us the satisfaction, bodily pleasures can never satisfy us completely. All these things, cogitating over them, meditating over them, that is right mindfulness. And this helps us to remain free from attachment and also free from grief. Then we come to the last step. What is the last step? In the Eightfold Path, when the aspirant has reached a high state, when he has meditated on these truths for a long time and also tried to live according to these truths, when he wholeheartedly has tried to give up his attachment to the world, he has tried his utmost to stay away from worldly pleasures, to become unselfish, to think of others as not of himself. When he has done this for a long time, when he has successfully guided his life in the light of the 7 steps which we have discussed, and when his mind has become free to a great extent from all passions and evil thoughts, then only he is fit to come to this last 8th step. What is that? It is right concentration or samyak samadhi. Samadhi, we all know the word in all this Upanishads and all. It is Samadhi is the highest state. We can achieve Samadhi only when we have attained perfection in meditation in the Hindu scriptures. But here, even a lower state is called Samadhi. Even the attempts for right concentration, which we call meditation, this is also called Samadhi in Buddhism. So, right concentration or right Samadhi is the final step. Now, this right concentration also has 4 steps. The aspirant, step by step, he goes deeper and deeper. He achieves deeper and deeper stages of concentration till he attains his goal of nirvana. So the aspirant, when an aspirant reaches this state, his mind has become pure to a great extent and it is unruffled by all these worldly disturbances. So, first of all, what does he achieve in this concentration? In the first stage of this intent meditation, the aspirant enjoys joy and ease born of detachment. Step 1 is when the aspirant meditates on these 4 noble truths and reasons about them. You see, our mind cannot completely imbibe these truths because of the deep-rooted sanskaras inside us which are of an opposite nature. So in the first step, when the aspirants try to imbibe that the world is full of suffering, naturally there will arise contrary impressions in his mind. These impressions will say, how can you say that the world is full of suffering, so much joy, enjoy this, eat this, go here, go there, there is so much, just go to one big mall and you will see so much objects of pleasure there. So these thoughts will arise in his mind. Now he has to reason and cogitate to get rid of contrary thoughts and be firmly convinced of the 4 noble truths. This is the first step. The second step, when this first step of concentration is successful, then from this results the second stage of concentration, in which he experiences joy, peace and internal tranquility, which is born of intense and unruffled contemplation. So in this state also, the aspirant is conscious of this joy and peace. In the next step, the third step, attempt is made by the aspirant to initiate an attitude of indifference to be able to detach himself even from this joy of concentration. This is the difference between the second and the third stage. Second stage, the aspirant experiences joy because his mind is unruffled. That gives him great joy. But in the third step, he tries to detach himself even from this joy of concentration, because he has climbed to such a high state that even this joy is found to be a kind of distraction. So when he succeeds in detaching himself from this joy also, from this results the third and still deeper kind of concentration, in which the aspirant experiences perfect equanimity coupled with an experience of bodily ease. So in the third stage, he has detached himself from this joy, but he is still conscious of this ease and equanimity. He has become indifferent to the joy of meditation, but he is still conscious of ease, that is comfort and equanimity. In the very last stage, the aspirant even puts away this consciousness of ease and equanimity and rises above everything. He completely transcends his mind, completely transcends this world, and attains thereby the fourth and final step of concentration, which is complete forgetfulness of this world. He becomes completely unconscious of this world. He rises to such a high state. In Hindu scriptures, it is described as complete merging into Brahman when we transcend our mind completely. So, this is the final stage, this is the goal, attaining which he becomes completely free from all kinds of suffering forever. That is called the perfect wisdom or pragya. This is the state of nirvana. When an aspirant has attained this type of concentration, when he completely transcends everything, then only he attains his goal. So, this in short is the eightfold path as taught by the Buddha. What are those? Let us go through them once again so that you remember them. First is, we should be completely convinced of the Four Noble Truths. Okay, that is the right view. Right view means our perception, our what we think about ourselves and the world should be completely changed in the light of the Four Noble Truths taught by Buddha. That there is suffering in this world, this suffering has a cause, and there is also a way out of this suffering. We should be firmly convinced of that. Why is this mentioned? Why is this step mentioned? Because, as I have said, now at our present stage, we have completely opposite views. Our views are completely wrong. It has been beautifully described in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, this what Buddha says as right views. So, Patanjali says that what is avidya? One who does not have right views is tainted by avidya. What is avidya? Patanjali says, anitya ashuchi dukkha anatmasu nitya shuchi sukh atma khyatir avidya. What does he say? Taking what is anitya to be nitya, what is ephemeral to be permanent, what is ashuchi, what is unclean, taking it to be shuchi, clean. What gives us dukkha, what causes suffering, thinking that it will give us joy. And fourth is anatmasu. Anatmasu with what is not ourself. This body is not ourself. In that atma khyati, in that we have this sense of I. So, four mistakes what we make. We consider what is ephemeral, we consider it to be permanent. What is unclean, we consider it to be clean. What causes misery, we think that it will give us joy. And what is not really us, like this body, we think it to be ourselves. So this has been beautifully explained. So till we try to give up these false notions, we cannot proceed further. That is why the right view is most important. Right view means we should know the world for what it is. Raja Maharaj says, Raja Maharaj means Swami Brahmananda, he says in one place, what is this world like? It is like the country hog plum, containing only stone and skin, but no pulp. It has no substance. After this, Raja Maharaj says, does he who has tasted the syrup of sugar candy, relish molasses? Worldly joys lose their flavor when one gets a taste of divine bliss. All objects of enjoyment appear to be not only insignificant but positively bitter. So once we experience real happiness, we will consider all these enjoyments to be not only insignificant but positively bitter. So this is right views. Second is right resolve. Right resolve means firm determination to reform our life in the light of those truths. Raja Mara, I will again quote Swami Brahmananda. He said, think of Buddha, what determination he had. After years of searching, he finally sat himself down under a tree, determined to realize God then and there or die in the attempt. That is what is needed. This is what Raja Maharaj says. So this is right resolve. Third, right speech. Fourth, right conduct. Fifth, right livelihood. Sixth, right effort. So right speech, right conduct and right livelihood we can all put under right conduct, because those are all part of our conduct only. After this comes right effort. Right effort means constant endeavor, means not to give up our sadhana. Again I will quote Swami Brahmananda. He says that a sadhaka means a spiritual aspirant should first learn about the spiritual path from some great soul, then methodically follow it. If he does it haphazardly, he cannot achieve much success. Again, if he gives it up, he will have to put forth double the usual effort to gain the desired result. Continue to perform sadhana even if you fail in the beginning. Don't stop until you succeed, and succeed you must. This is what Raja Maharaj says. If we just don't give up, we have to succeed. There is no other way. So the next is right mindfulness. Right mindfulness means constant nature about the perishable nature of things. Perishable means everything is anitya, nothing remains. Youth, beauty, fortunes, wealth, fame, everything goes. We cannot hold on to these even for one moment. Whether we like it or not, these will go one day. So, constantly meditating on that is right mindfulness. In this connection, I will tell a small story which was told by Master Mahashaya or Mahendranath Gupta, who has chronicled the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, as you know. So, very short story, but it teaches us a lot. So, Master Mahashaya said, this story pertains to the time when Lord Buddha was staying in a vihara. Vihara means, as you know, a monastery. A Buddhist monastery is called vihara. So many members of the royal families had become his disciples by that time. Now one day, news came to the Buddha about the death of a very beautiful courtesan who must have lived in that kingdom. So, this courtesan had been famous for her beauty throughout the country. Now, the king asked the Buddha how to cremate her dead body. Now, the Buddha asked the king not to cremate it immediately, but keep the body of that beautiful woman in a glass case for some days. Okay. Now, after a few days, the body began to decompose. Worms began to crawl all over it, and it began to emit a foul smell. Slowly, it became completely disfigured. When this happened, Buddha said to his disciples, "Go and see the corpse of that beautiful lady." The disciples went to the place where the body was kept, and what did they see? They didn't see any beautiful body. They saw an evil smelling mass of decaying flesh and bones. So, why did Buddha send his disciples to see that? Because he wanted them to understand that a beautiful body, worldly enjoyments, long life, etc., last only for a few days, and death awaits all living beings. We are all in its clutches. To firmly make this idea imprinted on their minds, did Buddha send his disciples to see that. So, this is the story told by Master Mahashaya, and since it involves Buddha himself, I thought of relating it. So, the net result of this right mindfulness, when shall we know that we have succeeded in right mindfulness? The net result will be detachment from the world. That is the only thing which stands in our way, you see. The sun is always shining. The sun of the Atman inside us is always shining. The cloud of this attachment has come in between, and we cannot see the sun. We have not lost God. We have not lost our Atman. We cannot lose God, because our real nature is Atman. The only problem is we have become attached to external things. So the net result should be detachment. In this connection, Swami Vijnanananda says, whenever the mind becomes pure and holy by being detached from material things, it reflects the effulgent light of God. For a man who has got that realization, the world ceases to exist. We fail to see God because our mind cannot go beyond the confines of the world and its objects. This is the teaching, that there is only one cause for our failing to realize God. Why? Our mind cannot give up this world. So, the fruit of right mindfulness, which is the seventh step, should be complete detachment from the world. Then an aspirant goes into the eighth step, which is right concentration. In these also has four steps. On the first step, he concentrates his mind on the four truths. He reasons and investigates. In the second step, all reasoning ceases. He experiences joy and peace. In the third step, he detaches himself from this joy but experiences ease and equanimity. And the fourth step, he goes beyond everything and attains paranirvana. So, see, this going beyond everything, I will again quote Raja Maharaj. Swami Brahmananda, once a disciple asked him, "Sir, if an aspirant gets a little taste of divine bliss, is he not much encouraged to proceed on the spiritual path?" So, in answer, Raja Maharaj says, "True, but in the higher spiritual state, there is neither bliss nor sorrow, neither pain nor pleasure, existence nor non existence." This is how Raja Maharaj answers him, that in the highest state there is no pain or pleasure, existence or non existence. It is beyond everything. That is called the Paranirvana according to the Buddhists. In Christianity, this is also called peace that passeth understanding. Understanding, why is this said? Because our understanding is limited by our mind. We can understand what we can grasp with our mind only. What is beyond our mind, we can never understand. So this peace is such, this final peace is such, that is, it is beyond our understanding. In the Upanishads it says, Avang manasa gochara. Vang means vak. Manas means mind. It is beyond speech and mind means what? It is completely beyond this phenomenal existence. So, avang manasa gochara, peace which passeth understanding, and the paranirvana of Buddha, which goes beyond everything, have one and the same characteristics. This is the last step, attaining which a man or any human being is completely free from suffering for all time to come. This is the thing. So this is the eightfold path of Lord Buddha, and as we have seen that it bears much resemblance to what we have read to some extent earlier. The even Jains, what they believe in, only the names differ. The sum and substance is the same. Gradually, Jains also we have seen that Samyak Darshana, Samyak Jnana, we have all seen that. Samyak Darshana means right views. This will lead to Samyak Jnana, which is correct understanding. So they say the same thing in different ways, and we have to take what we can from these, imbibe these, so that we can accordingly we can travel along this path and reach the goal. The same goal has been taught by everyone else, that is completely being free from this worldly suffering and attaining a bliss which does not end, that is infinite bliss of God or the Atman. This is the goal of human life. So I think we can end today. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat.